Welcome back to Khali Yoga Center. I'm Ian and I'm working with Chris today. And we are here to workshop downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. So let's begin in downward facing dog. And Chris is going to start in down dog, and the general form of the pose is that he's on his hands and his feet with his hips lifted up in this like inverted V shape with the body. And then the more specific alignment that we're working with, we're going to begin at the foundation and work up in the body. So Chris's feet are placed hips distance apart, and his inner ankles are turning back so the feet are parallel. Up at his hands are placed shoulders distance apart, and he's got his index fingers pointing straight forward. And then from there, the peak of the pose is up here at his hips, so he's pulling up with the hips and pressing back. And the action in the pose is Chris has his hands pushing down, gathering energy in through the arms, and then he's gliding the blades of his shoulders in toward his spine to expand the chest. And then with his legs, he's creating this powerful grounding down in the ball mounds of his big toes and pulling straight back with his inner ankles. And then his heels are rooting down toward the mat with a pulling energy up into the muscles of the legs. And then some spirals are happening in the action of the pose as well. So in his legs, his inner thighs are spiraling back, creating an opening in the lower back and the sits bones. And his arms are doing a similar spiral with the biceps spiraling forward, an external rotation of the upper arm bones, which creates this broadening across his chest and collarbones. And that's all coming from the powerful rooting into the triads of his hands, the thumbs and pointer fingers carrying most of the weight in the foundation. And then there's also a softening here as well. So the knees, you can tell Chris's knees aren't super locked out. His elbows have a little softness, and that allows the energy to move freely through the pose. Now, one of the common misalignments in the pose is that often people will have a shorter stance in their down dog. So as you can see, as Chris walks his feet forward, his heels drop all the way to the ground. And then you can see there's also no effect up here in his upper back, that the upper back starts to round a bit. So as Chris walks his feet back some, you'll see that there's space for his heels to reach toward the ground. And your heels might touch the ground, they might not. Both are fine. And with the longer stance here, there's some space to reach down without reaching that stopping point right away. And you can also see in his upper body, there's more softness here in the upper thoracic spine, more openness in his chest with that longer stance. Another common misalignment is that folks will have their hands kind of turned in, like more like a little like bulldog stance with the arms, and this just closes off energy in the upper body, and the elbows kind of go out to the sides more here. So as Chris turns his index fingers forward, that opens the chest up and makes more integration available on the back body. And it's all right to dial your fingers even farther out, especially if you're kind of like more muscled in your upper body and need some more expansion in the chest and upper back. Turning the hands out some can create even more of that external rotation in the upper arm bones that may be necessary for some folks. Now, one common thing that's missing in the pose is often the softness in the joints. So people will often lock out their knees and clock back into like hyperextension of the legs, or especially in the upper body, the efforting of pressing down will often lead folks to straighten the elbows all the way, which just puts more unnecessary stress on the joints, versus when Chris softens his knees a bit and softens his elbows a touch, then we're recruiting the muscles that surround the joint to support the stability and neutrality of the joint from the muscles so the bones aren't put in a stress. All right, that is downward facing dog. I hope these tips, alignment cues, modifications help you work with the downward facing dog that fits your body best. Check out some of our other Khali Yoga Center pose breakdowns to explore your practice.